Mexico is back in the news as its president, Claudia Sheinbaum, continues to muscle her way against the bully in Donald Trump. There's a lawsuit that's before the United States Supreme Court in which Mexico, in a very novel legal theory, decided to aggressively sue U.S. gun manufacturers, despite the fact that there are laws on the books that protect them because of the NRA and other gun lobby groups, and Supreme Court justices like Gorsuch and Kavanaugh willing to support them. But they have made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court about whether they can sue U.S. gun manufacturers for the gun epidemic and violence epidemic in Mexico. Very interesting oral argument. Learn how it turns out on Unprecedented, only on Legal AF. Let's take a listen to a clip. Why don't you give a quick summary about what happened at the oral argument? We do oral arguments here as well. Yeah. That the Mexican government had brought against gun manufacturers, been kicking around in federal courts for a long time, and it's up at the Supremes. And kind of what's your handicap of what's going to happen based on oral argument? And frame it first, tell our audience what the case is about.
So basically, Mexico was suing U.S. gun manufacturers for the harm, let's say, being caused in Mexico from these drugs getting to Mexico, getting in the hands of the cartels and creating all of this violence and crime in Mexico. And they were suing the gun manufacturers saying, you need to be liable for this harm. It was in front of the Supreme Court in oral arguments, and even the liberal justices seemed like they were not going to rule in Mexico's favor. This is the problem. We have a few laws that have come out that are problematic, let's say, for us as Democrats, right? The Citizens United, which allowed money being poured into it. The fact that the Supreme Court has never stepped in with gerrymandering and is allowing really horrible districts to be drawn in Republican areas. And the law in 2005, the Protecting Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, which protected gun manufacturers from being sued for any criminal conduct. If they didn't have that law, it would be much easier for gun manufacturers to be sued saying, you need to put, let's say, protections on these guns. You have this deadly weapon. Our phones have Face ID, let's say, right, to protect us. You could foresee that these guns are going to be getting misused. You should have some sort of ID protection or something like that, right? We could be having litigation around that, let's say. But the 2005 law that Congress Act protects gun manufacturers from these lawsuits. And so it's pretty clear. And so the question in front of the Supreme Court was, one, whether or not the gun makers had aided and abetted violation of U.S. gun laws. And if so, whether the gun makers' conduct caused Mexico's injuries. So those were the two questions in front of the Supreme Court, because they cannot sue the gun manufacturers for the criminal activity because that's protected under 2005. They have to say that the gun manufacturers had aided and abetted violations of U.S. gun laws. And that was the problem that even the liberal justices felt like Mexico couldn't make that argument. They were kept saying like, but what exactly are they violating under U.S. gun laws, right? And the question by Kavanaugh was, how foreseeable is this causation, right? If a pharmaceutical company sold a legal drug, but then it went on and into the wrong hands and got resold and let's say caused an overdose, like would they be liable? Like how are you able to kind of tie the two? So that is going to fail. That I think we can say that Mexico is not going to be able to sue the gun manufacturers for this. But for those of us who care about gun safety, that could be another issue that we talk to our representatives about, or our senators about, changing this 2005 gun law in a way to maybe hold gun manufacturers to account. It is probably true that they're never going to be maybe held completely liable for things that they cannot foresee, but that is always an argument for any litigation, right, Popok? So like, let's say I sue you, right, for something that happened. I always have to prove causation, foreseeability. Otherwise, I get thrown out in court. you're not protected by Congress's law that I can't even try to make that argument against you. So here Congress has kind of stepped in and put a big foot down protecting gun manufacturers because causation and foreseeability may be impossible, let's say, to prove in gun manufacturers. Or maybe you sometimes could. So that's another law that, people care about gun safety. If you're wondering, how do we change things? That's a law to look at, maybe repeal or revise it in a way to allow gun manufacturers to get sued. They can defend themselves just like anyone else, and maybe cases go thrown out, and maybe there's changes to make guns safer in this country.
Agreed. I mean, listen, I was involved with a case where it took an act of Congress to kill my case. It's all about lobbyists. For those that, when you hear that a state has a certain statute of limitations limiting your ability to sue, it's because there was a very effective lobby of doctors that shortened the medical malpractice statute of limitations. When or whenever you see a statute of limitations that's short to bar you from suing, that's because there was a lobby group behind it. Here, the gun manufacturing, the gun lobby, the NRA, and the Supreme Court justices that frankly were in the back pocket of the NRA, that were handpicked by the NRA, that were funded their campaigns, because there were campaigns to get them confirmed, funded by at the time the NRA. We do the show once a week. That's our report. It's Dina Sayegh Dahl, longtime Midas Touch legal commentator, and me, Michael Popok. We co-founded the show right before the election, and boy, were we right about calling it unprecedented. Everything about our times is unprecedented, including the U.S. Supreme Court. We look inside and outside the court. We look at oral arguments, shadow docket, emergency applications and writs, and the decisions and ethics around it. And sometimes we have to get into the personal lives of the actual judges because it maps onto their judicial thinking and their jurisprudential approach to cases. So we'll continue to follow it. You follow us. We'll follow you here on Legal AF and Unprecedented. I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.